Once upon a time, a ruthless horde of frost phantoms ruled over a breathtakingly beautiful mountain kingdom. The crown prince of this realm, Chris, suffered from a strange, terrifying curse of executioner's ice. His body was slowly turning into solid frost, and he had very little time left to live. The Grand Sorcerer revealed that only a fated mate could melt this ancient, deadly ice. In exchange for peace, the men of the kingdom sacrificed an innocent girl to the frost demons every year. This year, the merciless villagers chose a poor young girl named Clara and sent her up the mountain. Clara's grandmother was gravely ill, but the cruel elders ignored her tears and abandoned her in the snow. Clara became trapped in a fierce blizzard and began crying out into the freezing wilderness for help. Suddenly, a terrifying frost monster materialized out of the storm, who was actually Chris under the curse's control. Clara ran in sheer terror but lost her footing, slipping down the edge of a steep cliff. Chris lunged forward and firmly caught Clara's hand, causing a miraculous phenomenon to occur instantly. The moment Clara touched him, the ice encasing Chris's body began to melt, soothing his eternal agony. Chris realized that Clara was his fated mate, the only one destined to break his curse. Chris shed his monstrous form and returned to his true, powerfully majestic, and extraordinarily handsome human appearance. Clara stared at his breathtaking beauty and regal aura in disbelief, still deeply hesitant to trust him. Chris brought her back to his grand royal citadel, where frost magic guarded every corridor and tower. Inside the castle lived a cunning advisor named Richard, who secretly plotted to steal the throne. When Richard saw Clara, he instantly understood that this girl possessed the power to save Chris's life. Richard began poisoning Chris's mind, whispering lies that human girls only bring betrayal and greed. Chris approached Clara and announced that she would remain by his side as his future queen. Clara defiantly refused, stating she would never be a prisoner to a cold, heartless tyrant. Chris secretly dispatched royal healers to cure Clara's sick grandmother, wanting nothing more than her true happiness. When Clara discovered that Chris had saved her grandmother's life, her guarded heart began to soften. Soon after, the Grand Sorcerer pulled Chris aside to reveal a dark, agonizing secret about the prophecy. He warned that the exact moment the curse fully broke, Clara's human blood would turn to pure ice. Chris was utterly heartbroken. He could not bear to sacrifice the girl he loved just to save himself. He made a painful vow to distance himself from Clara, even if it meant his own demise. Chris deliberately treated Clara with cold harshness, hoping she would grow to hate him and flee the castle. However, Clara could now see straight through his mask, recognizing the immense suffering hidden inside him. Taking advantage of the tension, Richard tricked Clara and locked her deep within the castle's frozen dungeons. He lied to Clara, claiming that Chris was preparing to execute her and urged her to escape. Clara firmly refused to run, declaring that Chris was a good man who would never harm an innocent. Furious at her loyalty, Richard unleashed ravenous frost ghouls into the cell to eliminate Clara forever. Terrified but brave, Clara tightly gripped the royal enchanted locket Chris had given her and called his name. Chris arrived like a roaring hurricane, using his primal magic to instantly incinerate the ghouls to ashes. He gently gathered Clara into his protective arms, his eyes revealing the profound depth of his love. Richard quickly turned the tables, lying to the king that Clara was caught stealing forbidden dark magic. Deceived and outraged, the king ordered Clara to be banished from the realm and cast back into the wild. As soon as Clara arrived back at her old village, Richard's hired mercenaries ambushed her in the woods. Richard wanted Clara dead to ensure Chris's curse would consume him, leaving the throne entirely vacant. Clara fell heavily onto the crimson-stained snow, weak and wounded, believing her final moments had arrived. Right at that moment, Chris descended from the heavens with colossal ice wings and obliterated the attackers. Chris tenderly tended to her wounds, weeping openly as he confessed he could not exist without her. Clara reached out, taking his hand, and whispered that she would gladly risk her life to save his. They returned to the citadel, determined to complete the sacred bonding ceremony, regardless of the tragic cost. The sorcerer initiated the ritual, and the ancient stone walls began to glow with a magnificent ethereal light. As they shared a deep, soulful embrace, the curse shattered, and a violent tremor shook the entire kingdom. Suddenly, Clara's body turned completely cold, and she collapsed lifelessly onto the floor, just as prophesied. Chris screamed in absolute agony, begging the heavens to take his soul instead and spare his love. Richard laughed triumphantly, believing the prince was now too broken and weak to defend his crown. Consumed by righteous fury, Chris used his remaining power to trap Richard inside a glacier forever. Devastated, Chris returned Clara's body to her village and locked himself away in total isolation. But fate took a spectacular turn. The high priest discovered the dormant spirit of a phoenix within Clara. The cosmic fire of the phoenix pulled Clara back from the abyss of death, reviving her heart. When Clara woke, she discovered she had a beautiful baby girl, born with both frost and fire magic. Believing Chris had abandoned her intentionally after breaking his curse, Clara hid away for 6 long years. She worked tirelessly as a laborer in a dusty clay mine to provide for her daughter, Lily. One afternoon, King Chris came to inspect that exact mine, now ruling the vast empire entirely alone. Little Lily came running past and accidentally bumped into Chris, causing his heart to skip a beat. He watched in absolute awe as sparks of familiar royal frost magic danced around the little girl's fingers. Lily looked up into his eyes and softly whispered, "Daddy," feeling an instant, unexplainable spiritual bond. Clara came rushing out in search of her daughter and froze when she found herself face to face with Chris. She quickly veiled her face, politely stating that His Majesty must have mistaken her for someone else. Chris instantly recognized her unforgettable voice, and tears welled in his eyes as his long-lost love stood alive. He took her hand, asking why she had vanished, and left him to mourn her every single day. Clara replied bitterly, stating he had willingly let her walk into her death all those years ago. Chris wept, explaining the treacherous advisor's deception and how he had been ready to die for her. Lily gently placed her mother's hand back into Chris's, smiling as she asked them to be a family. Sensing the absolute sincerity in Chris's tearful eyes, Clara finally forgave him, letting the past melt away. Chris proudly escorted them both into his grand royal carriage, bringing them home to the Crystal Palace. The entire kingdom gathered in the streets, joyously celebrating the return of their true queen and young princess. The dark winter curse vanished from the realm forever, replaced by eternal spring and blooming fields. Chris, Clara, and their brave little daughter Lily lived out the rest of their days in absolute harmony. And so the legendary tale of the Frost King and the Phoenix's flame concluded with a perfect, beautiful ending. From that day